The scent of wild sage and sun-warmed earth filled the air as I stepped onto the weathered porch of Lone Pine Ranch. The Montana sky stretched wide above me, a canvas of gold and pink as the sun began its slow descent behind the rolling hills. I had told myself I wouldn't stay in Blue Hollow long, just long enough to settle Aunt May's affairs and put her little farmhouse up for sale. But something about this town felt different. Or maybe it was the man who had become a quiet, steady presence in my days, the one who stood now with his hands braced against the porch railing, watching me with those storm-gray eyes. Jake Calloway. He was as much a part of this land as the sturdy pines and the endless sky, his presence grounding and unshakable. I had met cowboys before, smooth talkers who knew how to tip their hats and flash a grin. But Jake was something else. He wasn't the kind of man who used charm to win someone over. He was all quiet strength, his words few but deliberate. And I had learned to listen for the things he didn't say. "You're still here," he murmured, his voice like the low rumble of thunder in the distance. I leaned against the porch railing beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. "Guess I am." His gaze lingered on me, unreadable. Folks don't usually stay in Blue Hollow unless they're running from something or looking for something they don't even know they've lost. The words settled between us, heavy with meaning. "And which one are you?" I asked, tilting my head to look up at him. For a long moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, with a sigh, he straightened, rubbing a hand along the back of his neck. "Left once," he said, his voice quieter now. "Thought I could outrun the past. Turns out it has a way of catching up." I wanted to ask him what he meant. Wanted to press until he told me everything about the weight he carried, the ghosts that lingered in his eyes. But I knew better than to push. I knew because I had ghosts of my own. "You don't have to tell me," I murmured, my fingers grazing the edge of the railing. "But you should know, whatever it is, it doesn't change the way I see you." His head turned slightly, his gaze searching mine, and for a breathless moment I swore the world stopped turning. Jake Calloway wasn't a man who let people in, but in that moment it felt like maybe, just maybe, he wanted to. The air between us was thick with something unspoken. I could feel it in the way his fingers flexed against the wood, in the way his breath hitched ever so slightly. And then, as if catching himself, he exhaled and stepped back. The loss of warmth hit me harder than it should have. "You should head home, Emma," he said, his voice gruff. "It's getting late." A part of me wanted to argue, to make him say what I knew was resting just beneath the surface. But another part of me knew Jake moved at his own pace. And if I wanted to be the one he let in, I had to let him come to me. So instead, I gave him a small smile. "Good night, Jake." He nodded once, his eyes lingering on me for a second longer than necessary. And then, without another word, he turned and disappeared into the barn, leaving me standing on the porch with my heart pounding and a whisper of hope curling around my ribs. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork, dusty boxes, and memories of a woman I had loved like a mother. Aunt May had been the heart of Blue Hollow, the kind of woman who knew everyone's business, but never in a way that felt intrusive. She had loved this town, loved the land, and slowly I was starting to understand why. I saw it in the golden fields at sunrise, in the way the mountains stood tall and unwavering in the distance. I saw it in the kindness of the people, in the way the town came together like family. And, of course, I saw it in Jake. He had taken to stopping by more often. At first, it was under the pretense of helping me with the old fencing behind the house. Then it was dropping off fresh eggs from the ranch. And one evening, it was simply sitting on my porch, staring out at the stars like he had nowhere else he'd rather be. But still, he held back. Still, there was something keeping him from stepping over that invisible line between friendship and something more. I was beginning to think I would never know why until the night of the storm. It rolled in fast, wind howling through the trees, thunder cracking so loud it rattled the windows. I had just finished lighting candles when a knock sounded at the door. When I opened it, Jake stood there, rain-soaked and breathless. "Power's out at the ranch," he said. "Figured you'd need some company." I swallowed hard, stepping aside to let him in. He smelled like rain and earth, like the kind of steady, unwavering presence I hadn't realized I needed. We sat by the fire, the storm raging outside, and for the first time, Jake talked. About the brother he had lost years ago, about the guilt he carried like a second skin, about how he had left Blue Hollow thinking he could escape it, only to realize this place, this land, was as much a part of him as breathing. And then, when the silence stretched between us, he reached for my hand. It was the barest brush of his calloused fingers against mine, but it sent a shiver up my spine. "Don't know how to do this, Emma," he admitted, his voice raw. "But I think I don't want to let you go." My heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. "Then don't," I whispered. The storm outside had nothing on the way my heart pounded as he brought my hand to his lips, pressing the softest kiss to my knuckles. It wasn't a grand, sweeping gesture. It wasn't fireworks or dramatics. It was slow, steady, real. And for Jake Calloway, that meant everything. For more romantic stories that tickle just the right place, like and subscribe.